Welcome to Work in Progress, Conversations with Creators. I'm your host, Logan Roy Speitman. On today's program, I have with me Manuel González, who was the Albuquerque Poet Laureate, now the New Mexico Poet Laureate. And he's been traveling around the state, working with students and people in detention centers and lots of places, spreading the message that poetry is medicine. We had a wonderful conversation, and I hope that you enjoy.
If you enjoy our podcast, please like and subscribe and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us bring you more content like this. You can find this episode and all of our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. See the show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading news.
Hello, Manuel. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
It's a great honor. And you are New Mexico's Poet Laureate.
Yes.
And how does that feel?
Well, it's a little bit surreal. It's became a bit of a roller coaster. I wasn't expecting it to be all of what it turned out to be. It became where I applied for the position and presented a actual proposal for a project that I was going to do. And my project is to visit all the different counties and do writing workshops and poetry readings in these counties, and then record what's produced at these things, and then put them online for people to access and be able to see the different styles, the different emotions, the different self-expression from all the different corners of New Mexico in that way. And so in that, I've been incorporating my students, because I work at the Native American Community Academy. So I incorporated them into my project, and I'm going to be taking them to all the different places. So I applied and I became the New Mexico State Poet Laureate. And once I was named, I started to represent New Mexico on a different level. Before I was the Albuquerque Poet Laureate, and I represented Albuquerque. And what it means to be Poet Laureate is that I'm an ambassador of sorts. One, I represent this art form that I love so much, that inspires me and I see is medicine that people need in this way. I represent New Mexico. I represent our people. I represent our emotions and our history and some of the scars and bruises and trauma that we carry around, but also the beauty, the wonder, and magic that's part of who we are and what we represent every day. So that's kind of how I became Poet Laureate, and then what Poet Laureate means to me in that way.
Yeah. I love talking to poets because I feel like everything you say, sounds like poetry to me. It's like, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's some poets that are just good on the page and, but, especially I guess, because you're coming mostly out of a spoken word tradition. So you're definitely a speaker.
Well, there's different camps of poetry. There's academic poets. There's written poets that really they write to be published, and they publish their work. Well, I come from the spoken word poetry slam camp, and those of us that come from there, we believe that poetry is community, and it's meant to be heard, and it's meant to be shared, and there's medicine there, and in that authentic and sincere self-expression, we find ways to heal from the scars and bruises that we carry on our heart and on our souls in that way. And so as we go throughout our world and share these words, these works, these self-expressions, we inspire others to pick up a pen or maybe express themselves authentically. And that's what that means in that way.
Yeah. And you mentioned poetry as medicine now a couple of times. I'm wondering if you can get into this a little more, maybe say I don't know, as you were growing up or when, if you can remember a time when someone else's poem was like medicine for you, or maybe you started writing poetry and it became a kind of medicine for yourself or for others.
Well, coming up, I was a knucklehead, and I got into a lot of trouble, and I got in trouble at home. I got in trouble at school. I got in trouble with the law. And it's not because there was something wrong with me. It's not because I deserved to be punished and I needed to be taught a lesson. What it was is that there was things in my life that I didn't know how to deal with. I didn't know how to talk about. I didn't know how to process. And it wasn't until I sat down and started to write down and express those things authentically and try to really get to the to the essence of why I feel how I feel and what that means, did I really start to heal from those things in that way. And once I saw that, I realized that there's medicine to be had there, because it wasn't just me and my own healing and journey. It was also inspiring other people to go on that journey in that way. Because poetry as an art form, I guess in all art we carry this, but poetry in specifics, I think we express ourselves and try to get to how we feel so that we can heal. And once we do that healing, it makes space and room in our hearts to appreciate the wonder, magic, and beauty that's the world all around us and all the time. But sometimes we got to clear out the cobwebs. We got to heal from those bruises. We got to deal with some of that stuff that we don't know how to deal with. That's where the medicine is. And that's the medicine that I found that I got to. Then I started going into high schools and detention centers and places where people need to do that healing. See, as poet laureate, I get to use poetry as a guise. I use literacy as a little ruse to get in the door to do real heart work, because that's what we're doing. We're talking about how we feel and why we feel that way. We're talking about the beauty of our grandmother's eyes. And in that expression comes healing and appreciation, and then we get to see each other for the human beings that we really are in that way. And that's what I see at poetry readings and poetry slams, as we see other people get up and talk authentically and really speak their truth. We get to see their humanity and how we're just like them and they're just like us, and we all carry things, and our differences are beautiful too. And see, that's what I think is beautiful about the spoken word. And in Albuquerque specifically, we have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to artists and poets and people that are willing to heal in that way so that we can all be inspired to do it. We have a poetry reading at least twice a week. Some of them are slams, some of them are just poetry readings. We have writing workshops. We have so many things going on all around the town all the time, and that's the community that I come from. Because Albuquerque's poetry community is vibrant, it's alive, and it's also a community. We take care of each other. We've seen each other's families grow, our each other's children get big. We hear each other cry on the microphone and cry with them, and that's how we get to know one another. And so our poetry community in Albuquerque is very tight, and I think that's a beautiful thing. And so that's part of the stuff that we get to share as poets. And see, when I say as a poet, I'm poet laureate. I've got these titles and accolades and whatever. Poetry doesn't belong to me. Poetry is something, it's language. Just like some artists use paint to paint a portrait, some artists use clay to make a sculpture, poets use language. And that's our medium. And if you can speak, if you can think, you can write poetry. And you don't even have to call it poetry if that catches you up a little bit. Just tell the truth in whatever way you know how, and in the best way you can. And in that truth telling, in that searching for the truth comes the healing. And then once we create something, then there's an artifact. There's something that you can show other people that, look, this is possible. This is something that we can do. And that's the medicine. That's what we do as poets.
Yeah. And unlike other art forms, like if you want to be a painter, you have to buy paint and canvas. That can be expensive. If you want to be a filmmaker, that's expensive. Poet, all you need is your brain and I guess a mouth or some way to express yourself.
Yes, you don't even see. I go to detention centers where sometimes the students that I work with, their literacy isn't necessarily strong, and so all they got to do is dictate to me, and I'll write down what they say. Or we'll even get fists and a pencil, make beats, and then they freestyle improvisational poetry from the top of their head. The process of that self-expression shifts something inside of them. It affects their spirit to the point of their self-esteem. Even those that are in trouble, even those that are hurting and are carrying a lot, playing with words is playing, and playing is something that as humans we need to do. And maybe sometimes take away all the big, heavy, important things that we're putting on this poetry and self-expression and just play with words. See what kind of rhymes you can find. See what kind of alliteration can you repeat the letter T with every word that you say. And in that, our subconscious kind of we decorate it and flavor it with emotion, with feeling, with reality. And that's how we protect ourselves with the metaphor, with the simile, but we tell the truth in these words. And that's where the medicine is. And that's where, like I said, you don't need anything other than your mind and your mouth to do this type of art. And that's why it's so universal and it's open to everybody and it's so beautiful. Now, let me tell you like this, I started getting into working in schools through a Poetry in the Schools program, and they were sending me to different schools all over the state, and I would dip into a school, I would hit every English class in the school, I would get all the kids to write, and then at the end of a week, we would have an assembly where the kids would share what they wrote, and then I'd go to a different school the next week, and it was cool. I was like Mary Poppins, and I would go, I would go in there, and it was great, but it wasn't so stable and reliable. And there were times where I had more work than I knew what to do with. And then there were months where we didn't work this month and we got to figure out how we're going to pay rent. Well, I eventually got a stable job. I became someone's everyday teacher. I got a job at the Native American Community Academy. And then I was the poet in residence. I was the creative writing teacher. I was the speech and communications teacher in that way. Now, that I thought I knew what it meant to be a teacher because of that Mary Poppins stuff that I was doing. I was never anybody's everyday teacher. Right. Somebody's like, okay, we saw your bag of tricks, Mr. Gonzalez. Now what do you got? And so my bag of tricks lasted maybe a couple weeks. And then after that, we really going to get into the heart where I really get to know these kids. It was more than just, dazzling them, getting them to cry, and then having them stand up and share their heart. Now it was really getting into the essence, into the meat of what we were doing. But I got a job at the Native American Community Academy, and that was different than any other school I had ever worked at because I was busy going to all these other public schools all around New Mexico, and I would do that Mary Poppins thing. And here at NACA, at the Native American Community Academy, I was encountering these students that were very reserved. It was hard to get them to speak. It was hard to get them to let their voices be heard. Like I could get them to write, and they would write the most amazing, beautiful, heartfelt poetry that just blew me away and busted open my heart. But to have them share it, they didn't really like to get the spotlight on them. They didn't like to have their voices heard. And that was hard for me because sharing is a big part of my workshop and what I do. So I had to really figure out a way to connect with them. And as working with them on their everyday poetry and being their everyday teacher in that way, I became a different type of teacher. And so I wrote a poem for them. And the reason I wrote a poem for them is because this was so different. Because not only is it just poetry, literacy, emotion, and teenagers, which was, that's what I'm used to.
Sure.
This was also ancestral trauma connected to it. Right. And so I'm going to share this poem about that. And it's dedicated to the students of the Native American Community Academy. And it's titled Clearly Spoken. And it goes like this. On this American soil, where prayers were stripped from tongues and fed back in the colonizer's language cleansed, corrected, but the prayers were already danced into the soil, stories carved into sacred stone. These indigenous students are still here, still singing, still sacred. They walk into my classroom carrying the constellations of their ancestors in their rib cage. Ancestral codes written in their bones, whispered in the spiraling scrolls of their DNA. Cosmic syllables humming low in their throats, spoken in the stars that illuminate their dreams. They are stardust and cornmeal, river, breath, and red clay. They come from Pueblos older than this nation, from Dene chants and Apache winds, from curious prayers whispered into canyon echoes and grandmother's mutton stew. They come not to be loud, but to speak from silence, from ceremony, from ceremonia, from generations unbroken by boarding school ash. They sit with quiet fire. Not silence, but fire, because their resilience isn't loud. Their fire is not for spectacle. Their rage is not theatrical, but it's clearly spoken. And I've seen it in the poems they write with their ink of resilience on paper that becomes a battlefield, a sweat lodge, a sacred site. They weave their words like prayer rugs that their grandmother taught them to weave on looms of ancestral cords. And she told them stories of the nightmares that she survived. They called it education in those old Indian schools with the children buried beneath the soil. And this new generation of indigenous children are here to heal from the traumas of their grandmothers. Writing their medicine in each and every line. They reclaimed religion and rewrote it as movement, as decolonization, as freedom, as the right to feel joy without taking anything from the past. And they don't do this for applause. They do it for return of land, return of language, return of love untouched by colonization. And their poetry is a revolt, a map, a reclamation. They speak from trauma. They speak of that trauma as truth, of survival, as inspiration, as inheritance. These students write to leave their mark on history, and they're still here. They're laughing, they're learning, they're healing with their hearts bleeding onto their pages, writing authenticity into each and every word. They turn classrooms into kivas, lessons into prayers. They do not raise their voices, they raise their spirits instead, and still we can hear them. Clearly spoken in every syllable, in every word that holds the power of a drumbeat, in every metaphor that breathes life into the bones of a people who are still striving, still surviving, thriving. They speak for the missing and the murdered, for the ones who were silenced to relieve the pain, and they relieve that pain, and they release that pain, and they plant something else in its place. They grow worlds where scars are just soft soil, and roots are stronger than anything that came before. These students are not monuments. They are movement, history, prophecy. They are prayers that our ancestors buried in the dirt to keep them safe until the world was ready for them to bloom again. And now they bloom here, now, in classrooms, in this poem, in this sacred moment, clearly spoken. These students are a movement, a vision. They are the ones that the ancestors wept, danced, and prayed for. They are the bridge between what was taken and what will never be taken again.
That's beautiful, very powerful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for reading that. I think, and I appreciate the introduction as well, where you're kind of describing coming into this environment, and it's a cultural difference from what you're used to, and it's like, I mean, you have some indigenous blood going back, but you identify, I think, as Chicano or
Yes.
Latinx, so it's kind of like because of your history, you don't have that same connection or that same, it's a different. You grew up differently, and we all grow up differently. I grew up in a family that was very expressive, and there was no passive aggressiveness. If there was direct aggressiveness, if someone doesn't, if my dad didn't like something I was doing, I knew about it, but we were open, and then dating people who come from a different cultural background where like you don't really speak things, or that can be an adjustment, I think.
Yes.
And I think, it's clear, I think, from this poem that, you had to find a way as a teacher to really understand your students and where they're coming from, and identify with them, and maybe talk about that kind of process.
Well, working with these students was difficult, but very inspiring for me, and I got to grow by working with them. And then because I come from a poetry slam background, I got to do a whole poetry slam at the school last year. And through the school-wide poetry slam, we picked 6 students that won the top 6 slots of the team. And then we took those top 6 Indigenous students to a national poetry slam, a youth poetry slam. It's called Brave New Voices.
Where's that?
Last year it was in Madison, Wisconsin, but it happens in a different city. This year it was in the Bay Area in San Francisco. But they went over there and they had never been exposed to this level of artistry because they got surrounded. They were to come from a regular high school and now they're surrounded with a whole bunch of other poets.
Right.
And they got inspired, and I got to take them and show them this national level of poetry. So we got to take these students to the National Poetry Slam at Brave New Voices, and they came back inspired and on fire. And so now I have this team, and this team is the team that I'm going to be taking this next semester as we start school. I'm going to be taking them to the different counties, and they're going to be representing their poetry. But one of the things that I campaigned on was the fact that I want to bring poetry to places that it's not necessarily thought of. So I'm going to not just be at the libraries. I'm going to go to the detention centers, to all the Pueblos. I want to visit feast days. I want to go to the throws, and I want our students to stand up and talk about their Indigenous genius by design and show them their shine in that way, so that we can show that this art form is living and breathing and real and sacred. And there's healing to be had. And it's not in any way just for the ivory tower of academia or people that decide that they want to write poetry. It's for all of us and for everybody. And it's a way for us to express ourselves. It gives us something to say at the protest rallies, at the places where we need to let our voices be heard. If you sat down and write a poem, people are going to listen to you. And if you have something to say that moves your heart, share that heart movement with other people. And that's how we start movements. That's how we ignite fires. That's how we change the world. I mean, it can be a little bit presumptuous and narcissistic to believe that a poem can change the world, but that's how we start dialogue. That's how we open these pathways of understanding one another in that way. Now, through being poet laureate, I was approached by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation to help them with their podcast that they were starting called Pass the Sopaipillas. And what they had already created and just had me come in to be the voice and the face of Pass the Sopaipillas was a place where we invited people from all over New Mexico, the people that are moving and shaking and innovators, because we have this. When we think of New Mexico, there's this idea that we are the bottom of every list and we are struggling and we are having a hard time and things are rough, which in some ways is true. But we are the leaders when it comes to like early childhood development. We're feeding kids in schools. We're doing so much when it comes to art and culture. We have an embarrassment of riches. We have all these things that are beautiful. And so what we're doing is we're showing the legislatures that are changing policies and laws. We're showing the artists that are moving hearts. We're showing teachers that are educating our future, the people that are dealing with early childhood development and working with our kids and daycare, all these things that make New Mexico a beautiful and amazing place that is different than anywhere else. So that's what I was doing with Pass the Sopaipillas. And through Pass the Sopaipillas, they invited me to do an episode of my podcast show in Chicago. And what I did in Chicago was I had the opportunity to interview Amanda Gorman, and I don't know if you're familiar with them. Yeah, she's she was the youth poet laureate. I still think of her as a youth poet laureate in my head because she'll always be a youth. But
she spoke at Obama's inauguration.
Yes, and Biden's as well. Mm-hmm. And I got to interview her, and we got to talk about this way that culture, poetry, self-expression, and art can heal in that way. And so I got to go over there and I got to interview some of the most amazing people in. We brought people from New Mexico, plus I got to interview Amanda Gorman.
Yeah.
And this all happened at the new Obama Center. We did it.
Yeah.
We did it there in his whole facility. They did the whole interview. They gutted out his it was the home court. That's where they had the basketball court, and they turned that into our whole stage where we did the interview. But I got to go and see all his whole area and his library and everything. It was amazing. It was inspiring, and I would just, it made me once again proud to be who we are, that there are ideals that we try to stand up for and that we believe in, that maybe sometimes we don't always hit the target that we're aiming at, but that target is there. And I got reignited with some of these things that inspire me to be not only, from here, but things that we believe in and that are beautiful. And I got to see some of those things. And from the writings of not just Barack, but Michelle Obama to the art that they have on display there. Every piece just blew my heart open and brought tears to my eyes. It was an amazing experience. I just got back from it just last week. And so that's leading me on to, in August, I'm going to be reciting poetry at the Library of Congress. And being poet laureate is opening these doors for me and these opportunities for not only for me to show my poetry and what I do, but also to show New Mexico and who we are and what we represent and our history and our culture and how we are a crossroads of cultures and there's tears and blood in our soil and stories to tell and this is how we add our story to the greater lexicon that everybody tells about what this greater American story is. Because I was poet laureate, I got approached to do voiceover work, and I'm reading the Declaration of Independence on the new Netflix documentary called The American Experiment. And they had,
my mom was just telling me she's watching that.
Yes, I tell her on episode 2, I'm reciting the Declaration of Independence there, and then I do another thing on episode 5. I did some voiceover, but it was so exciting. I was just a vato from Burque that likes to write poetry, and now my name is right next to Dolores Huerta's name on this thing that is about the founding of of America, and I bring New Mexico because this is who we are, and we are part of New Mexico. We don't have to explain that New Mexico is part of America. Like sometimes when we travel around, they forget that you speak English very well.
Right.
We're in America.
It's part of I want to say, and I'm not sure we may not have that much more time, and I want to make sure you get to read your last poem. But I want to say, just your presence is so dynamic. It's so energetic, and you have so much passion and love for New Mexico, for your students, for and it's exciting to see this, and I think especially. There's been this sort of movement in education that's been going on for decades where everything's become about data and standardized testing. And I think it's much harder to be this kind of I think every teacher should be like you. Maybe students need a variety of teachers to, but I think of teachers who really inspired me growing up, who had this kind of passion and who, and I just think that so much of that has been stripped away from the educational experience in a lot of places. And I'm just glad to see that at least you're out there having this kind of impact and doing real work, getting students to think creatively and critically and with heart,
Well, like I keep saying about that medicine that we carry, when I deal with young people, they're balls of emotion that they don't always know, and all of us are, but young people specifically are balls of emotion that they don't always know how to deal with. And I found that there's a tool you can use that helps you untie that ball a little bit, that helps you to deal with and process through some of those feelings that can sometimes just be a knot that we carry in the pit of our stomach.
Yeah.
And so by giving them this tool, it opens them up to like, yeah, now I'm not so tied up with all this nonsense. I can go learn math. I can learn, and I'm not teaching them grammar. That's their English teacher. They can worry about where to put the commas and periods somewhere else. I just want them to bleed and cry and put tears on the page. That's what I want.
Yeah.
But there's healing there. And that healing is the reason that I do what I do. It's my why. It's how I get up every morning, is because I know that I have healing to do and we all have healing to do. And I found this tool that can help us heal.
Yeah. Well, I hope that, you know, maybe some legislators and people will watch this and they'll see how important this kind of education is in the schools and in detention centers and everywhere else that you're going. Like, this is stuff that poetry is not just for elites, or, you know, it is for everyone and it can heal. And so, yeah, I hope we get to have more of this. I want to give you a chance to read one last poem, and thank you again for being here. This is a real pleasure and honor.
I'm glad to do it, because I think that being a poet laureate means that I represent all of us. Yeah. But I was Albuquerque poet laureate, and it had a degree of this. But now that I'm a little bit more, and I'm New Mexico poet laureate, I'm carrying the emotional weight of a people. And I'm trying to process that emotional weight of a people through art, through language, through poetry. Yeah. And it's a responsibility. Not only is it a responsibility, but it's something that I take seriously. And so this poem specifically came out of that, because, like I said before, we tend to have this narrative of what it means to be from Albuquerque or what it means to be from New Mexico. And I'm here to change that narrative and inspire us to take whatever gifts each and every one of us have to add to and heal and change our families, our houses, our neighborhoods, our communities, our cities, and eventually our state. And that's how we change the world. Yeah. And it starts like this. The title of this poem is Ritual, Vessel, Volcano, and Vision. Albuquerque, this is healing. It's reclamation. This is how we sanctify the soil, because we are more than crime statistics. We are San Jose sunrises, Barelas Barrio alchemy, Central Avenue gospel painting hope in bold strokes of dawn, blue light of the magic hour. From Tramway to Old Town Soul to the West Mesa, we carry medicina in our stride, our mouths, our breath, our hearts are our war drums, rebellion embodied by volcano breath. Blessed by the Rio Grande's sacred flow, Burque, you are holy ground, not forgotten nor forsaken. You are the drum circle, the car show, the lowrider moonrise over El Chante, Casa de Cultura, that temple. And West Mesa is the horizon, beckoning you to rise again like the sun over the sandias, to ignite every barrio that ever dimmed its glow. We are building a city that heals, that honors, that shouts joy into the future. We need to be the ceremony that heals this whole city, this whole state, this whole country. The universe will listen. We already struck the first match. We kissed fire and we walked smoldering stars. We awakened this city by touching the rain. Those muralized saints, the lowrider prophets, the Pueblo percussion, those spoken word sorcerers. Our artists bleed authenticity all over this city. We gotta shift the systems and slice through the borders. We gotta see that those kids, they have ancient souls, and our grandmothers can out-chant the algorithms. We gotta slice silence to story. We gotta change trauma to testament. We gotta churn survival into uprising. Burque, we have the power to rewrite gravity. We forge the future barefoot, on fire, and free. We are artists, powerful, abundant, magnetic as moonlight. The city raised us with calloused hands and hungry prayers. We were never broken. We were just buried like seeds. And we are the ancestral dreams and tears that nourish that soil. And we mastered sacrifice, breath, devotion. Burke, we build mesas out of marigolds and stardust. We move mountains with our tongues. These hands, they remember miracles. Albuquerque, we spray paint change onto barrio walls and weave it into our daughters' braids. We drop it low with the lowriders. This city is ceremonia. Every block is ceremony, a blessing. We are the medicine, the miracle, the shift. We are here. We are healing. We are sacred. And we are the sacred ones because our art comes out of our pain, our history, our family. Our trauma turns to creativity. We are the strategy, the spirit. This is ceremony, rebirth, Burke transforming. We rise together, ancestors singing, hoodies, feathers, microphones, altars of pavement, because we are the medicine. We are the children of corn and chaos. Mixtapes and medicine wheels. We build, breathe, and burn lies to the ground because we are fluent in flames, like the Mexican Revolution and the Pueblo Revolt. Our words are our rituals. This vessel is the volcano, and our vision, is to invite communion, inspiration, because we are exactly who we came here to be. Burke, here, now, community. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
No, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you for helping me share a little bit of this poetry and how beautiful New Mexico is. And hopefully maybe somebody else will be inspired to pick up a pen. And every week here in Albuquerque, there is an open mic, a poetry slam, something going on. Get out and share your work.
Yeah,
That's
maybe give a couple of shout outs to some of the open mics people can go to.
Search Burke Revolt is our poetry slam. Also, poetry and beer happens at Tractor Brewery. There's so much going on. We have a national poetry event that happens once a year here in New Mexico called the Chicharra Poetry Slam. Yeah. So much going on.
I had Zachary Klugman on the program before. So
poetry is alive and well and living and breathing and changing lives here in New Mexico every day.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me.